All right, folks, we're going to talk about getting micro famous, getting hyped. I've got Michael F. Schein. Michael, thank you so much for being on the Garlic Marketing Show. And we're going to talk about so much amazing stuff today. We're going to talk about how he helped the Medill Group, despite being, when they were starting to hit a lull, despite being a famous book and despite being Mike famous in a way, they were hitting a lull, and how they built a content engine to drive micro celebrity. The problem of being an idea person all the time, the problem how speaking can actually affect your business in a poor way, and what caused him to his client to be waiting around for referrals. And then we're going to talk about how he does it, the process of becoming micro famous, how he almost failed before learning how to become a hype artist, how to study malevolent mischief. I mean, we got so much on here, and I really like their make war, not love strategy, and how they test it and measure it with the wings method. All of this on the Garlic Marketing Show, of course brought to you by videocasestory.com. One of the best ways to get your message out there is through your customer stories. Go to videocasestory.com to learn more how to collect, craft, and deliver your customer stories. All right, let's get to it. And Michael is calling from New York, and we were talking about comic books beforehand. You'll notice that if you're watching on YouTube, you check out his cool horror comics in the background. I used to love horror comics too. So Michael, you've helped a lot of companies. Let's do a quick overview before we get into this amazing case story about Medill. Tell us a little bit about the types of companies you've helped and how you do it.
Yeah, so my company is called MicroFame Media, and we work with often consultancies, so companies that are basically in the business of selling ideas, some executive coaches as well, high-level executive coaches. And what we realized at a certain point was that once you reach a certain level of competency, if you're in the business of selling ideas, what makes you extremely, extremely financially successful versus, kind of just working, hustling for work, is whether you're seen as the guru or the dominant authority in your niche. So we're really, really good at making that happen, and we use a process called that we call hype, but we've redefined it in a positive way, and it's a very structured process, and so we work with those sorts of companies to make that thing happen.
Nice. And why is that important to these companies? What does it do for them?
If you're selling sheet metal or ball bearings, what makes you successful is really brass tacks stuff, supply chain, which we're having problems with now, but the quality of your materials, all of that sort of thing, price. If you're a consultant, what that really means is that you're in the business of selling ideas. So even if you're a very big consultancy like McKinsey or a mid-sized consultancy like the Medill Group, you have structured processes and intellectual property and all this, but when you peel back the onion, you're in the business of selling something very, very ephemeral, which is an idea. So obviously you can't be bad at what you do. You can't, because if you are, people are going to find out, and you won't get new clients. But once you're at a certain level, I've seen consultants who are so good at what they do, but no one really understands why they're the best at what they do. No one gets emotional around what they do. No one, kind of follows their concepts. And as a result, they're just sort of finding clients when they can. They're picking up referrals. Whereas we all know those thought leaders, as they call it, or consultants, who they don't even have to prospect for work. They have fans as if they were, the leader of a musical group. And when you're in the business of selling ideas, that really determines whether you're a multi-million-dollar company that never has to worry, or if you're just kind of jobbing it.
Yes, it's so important. And I want to get into your process after you tell the story. But before we get to that, I like this idea of micro-famous, because we talk to people all that about with video and when we talk about customer stories, you can become micro-famous, famous to the people. Yeah. And we have a definition, but how do you define micro-famous?
Well, yeah, it's really, are you the most recognizable figure, or are your ideas the most recognizable ideas in your little corner of the universe? So sometimes those corners are very, very small. I mean, I've seen people or companies who are micro famous in dentistry and in setting up dental practices, which seems so brass tacks, but in that world, that's a big deal. Or you go a little bit farther out, right? So Gary Vaynerchuk, probably among your audience, he and Seth Godin are stars, right? But they're not stars the way Rihanna is a star. They're not stars the way Harrison Ford used to be a star. My mother doesn't know who either of those people are, right?
I know.
Right. So in the internet era, it's a lot. There are still a few big stars, but it's funny. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and even her, and this isn't business, but I and all my friends knew who the top 20 movie stars were. She doesn't really know that. She doesn't know who Tom Hanks is, but she knows certain YouTubers in her world, Roblox YouTubers that are very, very famous to her. And that's MicroFame, right?
Yeah. Oh, Roblox.
Yeah. Right.
As a dad, right? It's the bane of our existence.
I know. But those Roblox and Minecraft micro influencers, those people, they're doing very, very, very well financially. I mean, and they have very dedicated fans and millions of them.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because, back to the idea of Gary Vaynerchuk or even Tim Ferris, like I felt like everyone knew who these people were, and no one knows who they are. Very few people know who Tim Ferris is, right?
In our world, they know who they are.
In our world, he's famous, right? But for the most part, most people don't know who he is.
And he's the biggest because of his podcast. Even him, I mean, he'll interview. I mean, he just interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, right? But even I asked my mom. My mom was scandalized by the Will Smith thing. That's a celebrity. She doesn't know who Tim Ferris is. And I say my mom only because that's the old model, right? The baby boomer. They know who the big stars are. Yeah. And that's not how it works anymore.
No, it doesn't. But much to the advantage, right? It's much to the advantage of a lot of your clients. So tell us about the company that you worked with and what you did for them.
So one of our clients was for many years the Medill Group, and we don't work with them anymore just because to a certain extent what we do has a shelf life. I mean, we've put a system in place for them. We worked with them for a few years and it's still running. But it's funny. I was sort of honored to work with Frans Johansson, who was the head of this, who is the CEO of this company, because I was a fan of his books. He has a book called The Medill Effect, which is a really not only is it a great book, this thing, the Medill Effect, again, in a sort of micro-famous world, has become a term that people use and a set of tools that people use. And then he wrote a really good book called The Click Moment. So when I finally got a chance to meet him, I was surprised by, even though they were doing well, they were really struggling. They were really spinning their wheels. And I don't think he would be ashamed or put out by me saying this, because we worked together to really break the problem. But what was going on was, when he wrote his first book, The Medill Effect, he had all the time in the world. It was in between graduate school and not knowing what he wanted to do next. He sat there, he wrote this book. And what happened was the book did so well, it got brought into a lot of, for chief diversity officers, used it for diversity programs, because it's this idea that innovation comes from diversity of all kinds. And the concepts in the book really caught fire, so much so that a whole company formed around it with a relatively large staff, real estate in Midtown Manhattan, very successful, worked with very, very big clients. The problem was he got so busy implementing the work for these big clients, ESPN, all of these large companies, that he didn't have time to so much as write an article, let alone a book, and he didn't have time to come up with his next big idea or promote that. So what we did was, and this was years ago already, so podcasts weren't as ubiquitous or all over the place as they are now. We said, okay, how do we solve this problem? How do we, your success is dependent on you being a micro celebrity, but you're now flatlining and you're going to decline if we don't fix this. So what we did was we said, okay, there are all these people out in the world who have implemented these concepts in the Medill Effect. And even though the Medill Group, his company, does that for companies, some people just take the book and run with the ideas. So we went around the country and even internationally, and we found people who were very public about using the concepts in the Medici effect. And we created a podcast, which again, at the time, this was much more rare to do, that basically had friends interviewing anyone who had used the Medici effect to drive innovation. So some of these people were, I mean, for the one example, which was really cool, is David Copperfield, the magician, is a big adherent to Franz's concept. So we had him on there and all kinds of people like that. Then what we did was we took the resulting content, because Franz is a big talker and he always interjects really cool stuff in between. We took all of the stuff and we carved it up into other forms of content. So print content, digital content. And then what we did is we picked out certain concepts that could serve as the next big idea. So we basically created this content engine that was completely designed to facilitate and generate micro celebrity. And it worked very, very well. I mean, he basically uses this strategy now to constantly be on top of that very thing that made him successful in the first place, so that it doesn't flatline and stall every time he gets very busy. And it was really exciting to be able to see that we could do that. And we've rolled out that strategy many times since with other clients.
And what started to happen when you started to release this content, and how did the business change?
You know, when he first started his business, Franz was all about, I hate the word thought leadership, but because it's become a cliche, but I'll use it because people know what it is. He went from being the author of the book to being a professional speaker. So he would get paid a lot of money to talk about his ideas. So he was just ideas all the time. And because the book was hot and because the book was new, he was booking a lot of these gigs. And then he, created the company, and most of the leads from the company came from his speaking gigs. But the problem was, it's very hard to travel around the country doing speaking gigs when you're doing the work. And he really wanted to have this consultancy. So what was happening was they were doing perfectly fine in that they had massive clients who stuck with them because they're good at what they do. So, ESPN, I think Turks and Caicos, I might have that. It was either Tortuga or Turks and Caicos. The government was their, the tourism board and the government was their client. Really big. I think Nike, they did a lot of work for. The problem was he had no mechanism for generating new business because he was no longer speaking all the time. But, when you have a book out for a year, that's great. When you have it out for 2 years, okay, but things get a little bit less exciting. So this basically replicated what he was doing as a one-man band with the writing and the speaking. So yeah, I mean, it brought new clients in. I mean, they've grown. They've been growing ever since. And I don't know that we were the only thing that made that happen. They're a very robust organization doing a lot of things. But I will humbly say it turned the ship around and set them out on the right path in a very big way.
That's great. And it's funny because you would think that just having the book and having the speaking, I think that's the dream of every consultant, right? A famous book and speaking gigs. And you would just think that it would just keep generating business. But that's an interesting point because of it's like referrals, right? That's if you rely on referrals and all of a sudden your referrals dry up, you're completely SOL.
And he was smart enough to get ahead of it. I mean, it was still generating business, but it was generating referrals. In other words, he had all of these clients, and whenever he's a great speaker. You should look him up. He's really dynamic. So whenever he did a talk, he would get work. You know what I mean? But yeah, they weren't going out of business, but it was just becoming stale. It wasn't, there was no mechanism for it anymore. And so he was sort of just waiting around for referrals. And that's a really bad place to be in, especially when, listen, there are very, very few business books that, even the best ones, that if you do nothing else will keep generating leads. Even, I don't know, who are the biggest out there? Even Nir Eyal or, Tim Ferris is a little different. Everything he does is 4 hour, but he still writes new books and he has podcasts and he, yeah.
And 4 hour work week was interesting because I was in a stand-up comedy class and I brought up 4 Hour Work Week as part of a joke, and no one knew
That's
what it
very
was
funny.
because
Yeah,
it got so dated
it's funny.
that, and I started thinking about it, and I was like talking to someone. I'm like, yeah, I kind of, you look at the philosophies in it, and it's very dated. And
Everything is
yeah,
dated, I should say. So my first job, it was a very, very low level job out of college, was I worked for this company called Spin the Bottle, and I'm 44 years old, right? So this was 1999, and what they were known for was they produced pop up video, which was at the time a big show, huge show. So every time I would, right, and it was on VH1, but this company owned the intellectual property and was in charge of it. So back then, I got so much leverage out of this. I was a very low level PA, but I climbed the ladder by telling people I was a guy. I worked for the company that produced pop up video, and almost to a person, they would say, "I love pop up video. Oh, that's amazing."
yeah,
I'm telling you, I'll interact with a lot of millennials and younger now, and they're 30 years old. You know, I mean, they're grown men and women. None of them know what pop up video is.
that's so
None,
crazy, isn't
none.
it?
I had that conversation the other day. I'll say I brought it up just because it would fit the story, and I'll be like, "Yeah, I used to work at this company. They did pop up video." I don't know. So even something that big, I mean, that was a famous show, not a micro famous show. That was
No,
everywhere, you know?
it was ubiquitous.
Yeah,
It was culture. I mean, it spawned like everyone had a pop-up video. It was like the Uber of back then,
yeah,
where everyone's like, "Well, this is a pop-up video of
right,
this."
right. And that just forgotten, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about pop-up video in
right,
forever. Oh yeah, it shows the importance of developing this engine.
right.
And so tell me about your process, because I want your process for making someone micro famous. Do you have to have a successful book to start
No,
out?
no, no, not at all. And in fact, our process has changed in regards to the packaging. I mean, the underlying concepts have always been the same, but some developments have happened in our business that have really kept things fresh. So, the way I learned how to do this stuff, I never wanted to be in business. In fact, I wanted to not be involved in business. You know, my father is a very straight laced guy who's the only thing he can talk about is business, and it used to annoy me, you know. And I was like, I want to be a more interesting person. So, and also I was really into writing, and we were talking about comic books. And then I went from comic books. I was really into music, like punk music, actually. So I wanted to do something like artsy fartsy, you know, and I did. I mean, I left. By the way, there's a method. I'm answering your question, but the point, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I get it.
But that's what I pursued, and I went to New York, and I played in a band, and we used to say we would hype up shows. You know, we never talked about marketing, and you know, we didn't quote unquote make it. That's very hard to do, but we sort of made it. I mean, we used to sell out this place, Arlie's Grocery. We were on Showtime at the Apollo, weirdly enough. Yeah,
Oh,
which we got
nice.
on purpose so because we knew we would be booed off. That was part of the hype, you know. So we had
Yeah.
you know a lot of success. None of it paid money, but we had a lot of attention. And we never said we would market, but we always did these like really in your face trickstery kind of things that made people laugh, right? And then when years and years and years and years later, when I started my copywriting business, I had become really corporate. I was working at a corporation for a long time. And so I tried to market my business, a copywriting business, and it didn't work. I almost went broke. I mean, I had a year's worth of savings. And I'm a good student, so I studied SEO and funnels and da-da-da-da-da, and I just couldn't make it work. And I was ready to like throw in the towel. It was pretty depressing. And I actually remember this. I walked past that club that we used to sell out all the time. And I was like, you know what? What the heck happened to me? I used to be so good at attracting attention and getting people emotional. And now I suck at it. What's different? And I was like, I got to think more like a hype artist, because the best marketers aren't really marketers. The Rolling Stones original manager, cult leaders, propagandists, they don't think of themselves as marketers. So I started to sort of study that kind of like benevolent mischief and not so benevolent mischief. And my idea was, can I execute this stuff in an ethical and benevolent way? And everything changed. I became really, really good at attracting attention, so much so that it turned into an agency. That's, you know, and then from there, when the book came out, I wrote this book, the Hype Hand book, which is sort of my Bible on these principles. What we do now is we work with companies to sort of weave the hype into their DNA. So we instead of just doing the campaigns for them, we help them, we walk them through all of these hype strategies, and we build experiments with them. And we execute the experiments side by side with them. And then when we nail one that works, we blow it up together. And it's been a great ride.
That's so cool. It sounds like a lot of fun too, because it's like out of the box, and you're doing some cool stuff. And so, you said it changes. Can you tell me a little bit more detail, like how you go about figuring out what to do? Because you said you experiment with it. Is it like a cyclical thing? Is it brainstorm, get it out there? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to give you the short version of this. So the book that I wrote is not theoretical. It's based on all of this research I did from all kinds of what I call hype artists. So people who, non-marketer marketers. And it's, as I said, it's everything from Richard Branson and Thomas Edison, who were as much showmen as business people, to Alice Cooper's manager, to some cult leaders and things like that. And what I realized was that if you extract the content itself, there are these meta principles that work over and over and over again, because human beings are designed to see the world in a way that lets us kind of survive and spread our genes, to make mental shortcuts, not in an accurate way. So basically we have these 12 hype strategies, and those are the umbrella strategies. And then within those strategies, what we do is we can conduct any kind of combination of ways to execute that. So for example, the first hype strategy is called make war, not love. It basically means you need to draw a line in the sand and take a bold stand against a dominant idea in your niche. Now, there are a million ways we can do that, and we've developed all these tools and blueprints and structures that kind of guide that and that break down the walls in your head. So we take our clients through those exercises, and side by side with them, we generate an idea that may or may not work. So we have 3 types of experiments. We like college, like there's the safety experiments. It's like, yeah, it follows the hype principle, but you're not going to fall on your face, There's the reach experiment, which is like, if this thing works, it'll be amazing, but if it doesn't, it could be a disaster. And then we have the one in the middle. And then we say, what's the smallest executable step that you can do to test this idea and get some kind of read that it's worth double, triple, quadrupling down, adjusting the experiment, or cutting. And we keep doing this and going through the hype strategies until we find one that just is wow, this thing has traction. We have to jump on this. And then we just throw our resources into it, and really blow it up.
I love that you're testing, right? It's ideas and testing,
Exactly.
and testing.
Yeah.
Because I think there's this idea out there that these ideas come into play, and then it's just one idea and we make it happen. I was talking to what's his name? Oh my God, I feel so bad. From the Harmon brothers. And, we were talking about the Super Bowl ads, and he's like, I would never do a Super Bowl ad without having data. And it's just, people think that this stuff is, you come up with this one magic idea and then it's there. How often are you right?
I look at it a little bit differently. We know that we're going to be right within certain time frames. So in other words, so when I start an engagement with a new client, we ask them a couple of questions. One I stole from Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, but it's basically, if we're sitting here in a year and you're just as overjoyed as you could possibly be with the work we've done together, what needs to happen between now and then? And they usually have pretty grandiose stuff, right? But then what I say is, okay, 3 months, which goes pretty quickly. What is the thing that's going to make you say you're happy to have done this? And usually it's something relatively modest but important, like, 10, if it's a really big ticket client, 5 to 10 coffees with prominent people. I mean, it could be anything, that's meaningful. And so then we measure everything according to that. So we have this scorecard called wins. So a lot of times people don't know how to measure marketing, the kind of marketing that's not totally data driven. When it's like social media engagement, does it mean you get a lot of likes? Like, what is engagement? So this is how we measure it.
Yeah.
So we say W means willingness. Is it something that you're willing to do that's fun? And that's the least important one, but it's important because if you hate doing it, it doesn't matter. I is intensity. What's the level of intensity? So it's not that you get likes. It's not, oh, wonderful, great, da da da. It's, are people fired up, or are people fired up in a negative direction? You get giant paragraphs telling you what a jerk you are because, well, that's a good thing, right? Sometimes. Next step, according to that 3-month goal, is there some next step that's getting us closer? And then sustainability. Is there a way to systematize this? If none of them exist, we cut the experiment. If one of them is missing, we adjust the experiment. And if they're all hit, we accelerate the experiment. And by doing it within a 3-month thing, then we know it's more about, I might do 5 experiments and be right twice, and that's amazing. Or I might do 28 and be right twice, but I've learned so quickly that it failed that I can do either of those in 3 months. But I'm going to be right by the end of the 3 months. And then I'm going to be right at the end of another 3 months. Enough times. I just need one.
Mm-hmm. I that's amazing because this is one of those mindset things. I think it's so subtle, but it's so important to success in this business and to growing your business. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm going to do, and something's going to work, and I'm not, but you're not latching onto one idea and saying, I have to make this one thing
That's
work.
it. And that's true in life, right? Like I know these people who are like, they've been working on one artistic project, let's say this magnum opus screenplay for years, and they're like, I have to get this screenplay to work. I must be a screenplay writer. And I'm like, what if you were a novelist? What if you worked for a marketing company doing storytelling marketing? Like, the minute you get hyper fixated, it's like, if I don't get this one thing, I'm gonna die or be a failure. You're putting your life in the hands of luck, because there's a lot that goes into making one experiment or one project work. You have to be a little bit agnostic about the idea, I think.
I agree. And I think there's, I think we've been marketed this idea that there's all these people that just latch on to one idea and make it super
100%.
successful. But if you really go back into it, I always come back to Walt Disney, because I think, you look at his level of success, but he thought Fantasia was going to be the best thing ever.
Exactly.
And that thing flopped and flopped and flopped. And never, it's still like,
it's certainly not, not the ultimate Disney classic. Yeah.
No, it's definitely not, any of the modern ones either. And it's funny that, you say that, because I think that it's such an important thing to people get in the marketing, because I think, it's a problem. I see people come in and they're like, oh, I've got this idea for this video and this is going to be successful. I'm like, I don't know. You don't know. No one knows.
It's so
true.
And it's a survivorship bias. I remember seeing Busta Rhymes years ago, that rapper, saying, my secret of success was that I had no plan B. And you can just imagine all these young kids who want to be rappers or rock stars listening to that and following that. And the only reason that worked is because he succeeded. But for everyone who doesn't have a plan B, there's 9,000 people who don't have a plan B and end up not even working. They end up in a cardboard box. It's a terrible, it's really bad advice. Yeah.
It is. That's why I love, Stephen Pressfield's books, and he talks about his failure. And, he'd have to go back to doing stuff until it worked again.
Yeah.
But in marketing, that's exactly it. It is just, and sometimes you do something in marketing and it works like 3-4, like the podcast works 5 years later. All of a sudden someone's like, oh yeah, I saw that podcast 5 years ago.
100%. I have to manage my client's expectation with that, because a lot of times they'll say, and it's for obvious reason, they'll say, well, when are we going to start seeing the traffic, or when are we going to start seeing this? And what I say to them is, and it tends to work, although I have to repeat it, I'll say, I'm going to admit to you one thing that hardly any marketing agencies or marketers will admit to you, and that's that marketers don't know what they're talking about. And they'll laugh. And then I'll say, what I mean by that is that there are marketers who have a knack for marketing. There are general psychology principles that work. But if any marketer says to you, you stick up an Instagram, feed it into a funnel, put a clock on the funnel, and that's what works, it's not true. And I mean, not to name names, I think Russell Brunson is a genius and he has a great product, but if I see another ticking clock on a landing page just because it worked for Russell Brunson, I don't know, by the time someone wrote like a book, how to market with Instagram, it's probably too late.
Yep, I agree completely, and that's where having someone like yourself, because it's like this innate knowledge that you have, and you're like, I don't think that's going to work, or I do, but let's go out and test it. And,
yeah, exactly.
And
in a controlled way.
In a controlled way. And I love that your wings measurement too. I think that is fantastic too. And the question too. I can't believe me. I've been asking that question for 15 years. The first question I asked is, if everything works in this business, what's it gonna look like 18 months from now? And 50% of people had no answer for me. And I'm like, and then they expect marketing to make them go where they don't know. Oh man.
I think I have to say, I think part of the thing with that is that companies, we get the privilege of giving people clarity around that, in fairness to our clients, because they know that this thing called marketing is important. They know that the people they admire are doing it. They know that they're not where they want to be, but they have no idea what they expect for it to get them and how. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So, all right, this has been fantastic. The Hype Handbook, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's available on Amazon. Obviously, it's a fantastic book. And quick question, is there an audiobook?
It is as well. Yeah, it's paper, not paperback, hardback, Kindle, and audiobook. Yeah.
Do you read the audiobook?
I don't, actually.
Okay.
In fact, it's very funny because a lot of people advised me that I should. And I talked to my editor, and I was like, let me read the audiobook. And like, no, it's really important that we have this professional. And we had a thing, but I let them have their way. And I was wrong. I mean, the guy's great. He's an actor. He's fantastic. He's better than me. So
nice. Who is it?
They were right. And I don't remember his name, I have to say.
Yeah. I listened to
I've listened to it 3 times, so I know his voice very well. Yeah.
I listen to so many audiobooks, and like there's certain people I hear their voice, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to listen to this person. They're like, they're micro famous to me.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll go link to that, MicroFame Media. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. And where, speaking of micro famous, where do you spend most of your time on social media, or any?
Yeah, there is some. I mean, I would say professionally, I've probably gotten the most out of LinkedIn. I have a very big following there, and I post my content there. I would say that I waste the most time on Facebook, which my daughter tells me it makes me an old man. Only old people use Facebook, which is funny. I went off it for 4 months, and it was the happiest 4 months of the last 5 years. And then when my book came out, I was like, I should promote it on there, and it did work. But now it's just sucking my brain, again. And Twitter has become so ridiculous that I spend much less time on there than I used to. Instagram, I don't take a lot of pictures, so not on there that much. How about you, Ian? What's your big social platform? Because I see you, I see your name all the time. I mean, you do a very good job of getting out there.
YouTube is my favorite. It always has been, and I'm spending more and more time in there. Because like all the stuff you don't like about Facebook is kind of not there.
That's true.
And I can learn.
That's true.
And my only problem is I love to learn. And so I'm like, oh, today I'm going to learn how to play this on ukulele. Oh, I'm going to learn how to do this. Oh, I'm going to learn how to cook this. I'm going to fix.
I didn't think of YouTube as social media, but I do spend time on YouTube just personally.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And LinkedIn. Yeah. LinkedIn was great. Now I'm like, marketers killed it.
They kill everything. Yeah.
We kill everything.
But I'm a hype artist. I'm not a marketer, so I get to exempt myself.
Oh man, maybe I want to become a hype artist.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, Michael F. Schein, thank you so much for being on the Garlic Market Show. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, I had a really, really good time, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for listening to Michael and I. Make sure to go check out his book, buy it, learn it, tag him in it, and check out MicroFame Media if you're interested in becoming microfamous. It's super important. It's been Ian Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show. Thanks for taking us on your journey.